Well, I have kind of an analogy for directing Muppets, which is, first of all, you need enormous planning before you get to the shoot day. But it's kind of like directing icebergs. You know how they say two-thirds of the iceberg is underwater? You have to really be conscious of the frame line below the frame and the activity below the frame. So when you're blocking puppets above the frame, it's all in a much smaller space. When you go below the frame, some of these puppets have two human bodies underneath them. Some take three, some take one. You have to be conscious of all of that, and that affects your framing tremendously and the blocking that you'll be able to achieve in the scene. You know, I try to, whenever we have scenes like this one, to stand them up. Puppeteers, it's better generally for their performance to stand them up. $2 and he got another seat. See? Two and one together and voila! Elmo has three. Yeah! Later on, we'll see scenes where everyone's on the ground because we have scenes with humans, and that's a whole different choreography below, but it also compresses the puppeteer, you know, and it compresses their lung capacity. They sing better when standing up. If you're seated, it's not as easy to sing. It's not as easy to vocalize. And if you're in a contorted position, and that's more often the case when you're on the ground, it's harder and harder to vocalize. And we take pride in performing our puppets with live voices. So it affects us tremendously in that way.
What's a stupendous ball? I'm glad you asked. Behold, stupendous ball. Wow.
So in addition to the blocking below the frame, with humans, you now have to be conscious of height differences. So you may find that if you have children, for example, and puppets, you expect to be able to put them on the floor with the puppeteers, but the fact is, because of the puppeteers, when they are seated and their arms are in the air, the puppet actually ends up being much taller than the child. So then, consequently, you have to build up the floor below the child and bring them up to a height where generally the puppet is a little bit shorter, you know, especially someone like Elmo or some of our other characters who are 3.5. They need to be shorter than most of the 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds that we have on. So, and the same applies to adults, but it's a little bit easier to even out and create sort of a believable height relationship. A good trick is to try to bring your puppeteers and your puppets to the foreground. It's easier to establish relationship that way. It also forces the human's eye line more towards lens. If you end up burying puppets next to them, you end up with characters and humans more in profile. You know, so if you bring them to the foreground, you have a lot more flexibility. You can also adjust the bottom of your frame to help the puppet's height. Don't bring them so far down. If they need to relate to the human, we still put them in the foreground of the human, and they can cheat their eye line. Mm-hmm. The great thing about puppeteering with monitors is they can, at will, cheat their eye line and make it believable, whereas a human doesn't have that kind of feedback in order to be able to adjust themselves.
Ice cream maker?
Todavía no, Elmo.
Oh, well, maybe Elmo will just think of something else to do with his money.
We pick certain moments. It's our style, since we want to establish a relationship with the home viewer, especially a child viewer. We break away certain lines that will be delivered to lens, and the same for the puppet characters. It's part of our culture and part of our show culture and our show style. in order to do that. We do that with some of the puppet lines as well. But it's really, it has to do with interactivity and trying to keep reconnecting with the viewer. The puppeteers use the monitors to provide them with instant feedback on their position and then performance. The amazing thing is that when they're looking at the monitor and they move to the right, on the monitor they're actually moving in the opposite direction. And how they reconcile that in their heads, I don't know how they do it. I know in Great Britain they actually technically flip the image so that it matches. It's a direct mirror. So if you were to go look in the mirror and perform, it would match the side of the frame that you're on. And in Britain, they work that way. If the puppeteers are standing, they'll position their scripts next to the monitor, below the monitor. It depends how many pages they try to cover in one scene. And that's something to be aware of when you're directing, is if you're attempting a lengthy scene, that may not be possible, number one. Number two, the paste up with the scripts will have to almost surround the monitor. If they're on the ground, they very often tape them to their thighs, their legs, their limbs, whatever they need. They'll start some on the monitor and then attach some to their body parts, and so they can continue the scene. And it depends on their position. If their blocking changes, they'll have part of their script when they're oriented in one direction, and then part of their script in another place, either hanging somewhere else or on a limb. That's how the puppeteers work. It's pretty amazing. There are many challenges with puppeteering. It's interesting, a script that may seem simple may be a challenge for a puppet. It may require numerous tape stops, numerous little micro setups. For example, a puppet coming into a scene, picking up a pencil and drawing with it may require 3 or 4 or 5 tape stops. Yet we can make a puppet fly in the air. That's one take. That's one setup. So it's almost an inverse reality. It has really trained me to plan as thoroughly as I can, and that I can apply anywhere. So working here has just increased my sort of homework level, but also my ability to pre-visualize tremendously over the years.